to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we can talk about. Chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we can talk about. Chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we can talk about.
You are now tuned in to The Chop Shop with your host, Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr. Let's chop it up.
What's going on, Chop Shop audience? I need everybody to do me a huge favor. Like, love, and definitely share. Even tag the names of people that should be with us tonight in the comment section so that they can get an alert to come on here, because tonight is going to be a really, really important show. We are kind of going back to our roots. We still bringing you quality kingdom content, but what we are doing is we are talking about something major that has impacted Baltimore. That's right. The people have come out to the polls. They've exercised their right to vote. And we have what I would classify as sweeping change happening in the city of Baltimore as it's impacted by this midterm election at the state level. And we got one of the foremost authorities on the electorate, on politics, on policy, on how these things all intersect right here in the city of Baltimore, in the person of one of our favorite guests, Mr. Dayvon Love. So I need you to get some people on here. Literally go into the comments, tag their name, at them, send it to your favorite groups, tag your church group in it, whoever, because this is going to be valuable information. It's going to inform how a lot of things are going to go moving forward. But before we get to that, I got to bring on my right hand and my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts, on the ones and twos, making the magic happen from behind the scenes, Technique 1200s, because anything else is uncivilized. Shock, what's going on with you, my brother?
Good brother Marv, what's up? How you doing?
Man, I'm excited about tonight's show. We got my guy here tonight. And if anybody is going to pull all of this together and make it plain for the people, I know, you know, the 48-hour news cycle, we like to read the headlines, but we got Mr. Details himself tonight, man, Dayvon. Dayvon always brings that fire, bro.
Oh, nah, he gonna talk. He gonna talk. You know what I mean? And listen, let me make it clear. When I say talk, I'm talking TAWK. He gonna talk. All right. My man gonna talk, so don't, you know.
With the up north accent, he gonna talk.
Nah, he gonna talk. Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Yeah. Well, listen, y'all, I ain't got a whole bunch on the news tonight, man, but I do have one public service announcement. I put it on my Facebook page. Stay in your car. Stay in your car. Seen another video.
Man.
Fox pushing
Man, I had to come back on camera for that one.
Fox pushing another half a video of another encounter between a squeegee worker and a motorist who again opted to get out of his car to get confrontation. Man, listen, we don't think the loss of life is anything to take lightly, but take my advice. Stay in your car.
Listen,
go ahead.
Decisions matter, Marv. Decisions matter.
They matter, man.
Decisions matter.
I had one of them people who don't never like to come and talk to me on the timeline, jump in my inbox and say, so what you saying, man? Somebody deserved to die because they got out their car. I said, are you having a problem that I'm giving people good sound safety advice? Do you believe that it's a good thing to get out your car and get confrontational?
Listen, I'm you know, I come from what they would say, that mob, and I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You understand? I'm not doing it.
Not to mention how I would have reacted if I saw somebody with a bat approaching some black kids who was trying to earn a couple dollars. I ain't gonna get into, y'all ain't ready for that conversation. Like, love, share, tag people in it. But this man who's a father, this man who's an advocate, a mentor, how I would have reacted if I would have saw a man wielding a bat at some kids who were trying to make some money. Now I ain't saying somebody's supposed to pull out a gun and kill them. Ain't what I'm saying. But y'all ain't ready for that conversation. Come on, man. Let's run these church announcements because we got a whole bunch of them tonight, and I want to be able to get every one of them in. Y'all, listen, I don't know where the organ music at, but y'all know it's church announcements time. And as always, we kick it off with the Stop the Beef hotline, 443-431-3705 or 443-522-7848. If you know of somebody that's involved in a confrontation, no matter what level it is, and they need mediation, intervention, even a bill paid, call those two numbers. Men are going to respond, strong men who are going to come and intervene at every level, that we may not see another life lost it because of a beef, and walking hand in hand with it now for 2 years, the Baltimore Peace Agreement is where we go to the brothers who are 10 toes down in the community, and we get them to sign off saying, even if I got to eat in the street, I ain't got to die or kill in the street, because peace must abide. We're celebrating over 1 year without any non-fatal shootings or murders in the community that I love, the Poe homes. To God be all the glory, but I'm grateful for all of the people that helped put that work in, man, and it's an ongoing process. Our community is taking pride in peace, so the Baltimore Peace Agreement will come to your neighborhood. Just reach out and we'll be there. The Employee Baltimore Show coming to you Thursdays at 1 p.m. with good employment information, hosted sometimes by yours truly. I'm not there every week anymore because I have some other responsibilities related to my job. But if you want to, somebody that's looking for employment, send them Thursdays at 1 p.m. because at the Mayor's Office of Employment Development and the Youth Opportunity Program, we are the plug. All right, y'all. Victory House Worship Center, the place where I'm blessed. The pastor come through and see us on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. If you just want to have a place where we care about creating a safe space where people can keep it real and have a real life encounter with God, you want to come on through Victory House Worship Center again, where I, yours truly, have the pleasure of being the pastor. The people have spoken. The great group of men, the LT9 that I've come together with, and we've started this work we call the Lexington Terrace Project, is rooted in peace, but we bring in workforce development and so many other services to our community. We put this along with 2 other images up to be our logo, and the people from our community and our I Miss Lexington Terrace LT for Life group have voted, and the selection was easy, man. Over 100 and something votes, and this image got the majority of the votes. There was 1 or 2 for the other images, but you're going to see it coming to you. Y'all see it. It's the orange and black. It has always been the orange and black. We ain't jumping on the bandwagon because the Orioles winning now. The orange and black has always been our colors, but you're going to see it all over our gear. Please pray for and support the work that we're doing. Our community, again, has gone over a year without a non-fatal shooting or a murder, and we want to celebrate the young people down there. So you're going to hear about more to come. Make sure that you stay tuned. We coming on Saturday at noon. That's right, July 30th, Saturday at noon. The Minute of We Are Us movement will be at Pennsylvania and Dolphin Street, starting in the parking lot of Furman L. Templeton. And you know what we do. We're going to bring life, love, and resources to that Pennsylvania Avenue community. So if you are a man and anybody really on Saturdays that want to come out and put your feet to the pavement, some wheels on your heels, skate through and be a blessing, come on and show up. If you fed up, show up. All right, 3 p.m. I put a video up, shot of me with that stick showing her. And listen, last year I did my thing, but this year I'm in better shape. I took a couple of cuts at our last practice, man. The bat is cracking. I'm going to be holding first base down because I still got to get a little bit more weight off me. But this Saturday, LT for life, LT for life. The Lexington Terrace 9 is sponsoring a community cookout and a softball game. This thing is spearheaded by my homeboy. We call him Hollywood, my man Dion. We grew up together. And, man, we are in give back mode to our community. So if you're not busy, come on down Carroll Park on Saturday. You're going to see a good softball game that's going to be between all of the brothers that grew up down there. And if you want to pick up a bat, ball, or glove and join us, you're more than welcome to do it. Live in concert, one night only, Sunday at 6 p.m. Yours truly will be in the building, sponsored by Karan Jones Productions, one of my best friends, right? She's doing her thing. She's an incredible artist in her own right, but she's bringing Baltimore's own back to Baltimore. I don't know if they're coming from Randallstown to get there, but my guys, David and Dante, we talking about the one and only Rough Ends are going to be in the building. No more shopping sprees, no more late night creep. They coming, man, and I'm going to be there to support Karan and to cheer for my guys. So if you ain't doing nothing on Sunday evening, tickets are still available. The flyer will be posted on my page and in my story. $30 general admission. But if you like me, you want to be in that VIP so you can have the best seats in the house. Come on and support local entertainment being produced by local producers. We got another community walk coming up on Monday, August the 1st. We're going to be leaving from 940 Madison Avenue. 940 Madison Avenue. Meet us there on Monday. If you're a man, this is the men's only walk. Only men walk on Monday night. And we're going to be hitting that Druid Heights community and we're going to be making sure that we bring love, light, and resources to the community. Woo! That's right, y'all. It is that time again. August the 27th. The neighborhoods that I love and grew up in, the Lexington Terrace, Poe Homes community, now broken up into Callaway, Row, Poe Homes, Poppleton Place, Vintage Gardens, and the towns at the terraces, y'all. We're going to be bringing a bunch of free stuff to the neighborhood. It's sponsored by yours truly, our church, Victory House Worship Center. And this year, we have a big sponsor with us, Dynamic Healthcare. They're a mental health service provider. One of my really good friends, shout out to brother Wally Hernandez, who was just there with a table last year and has come back this year, offsetting the cost and doing some other things to make it happen. We are going to be in the 800 block of Lexington Street, y'all, live and in color, blessing our people. If you like to make a donation, we'll post the Cash App for you to do so. The singing pastors, me and 5 of my brothers are going to get together with no rehearsal, and we're going to stand up. You're going to hear some praise, some worship, some quartet. You're going to hear some everything. Come and join us in the building on Friday, September 23rd. Woo, boy, it seems like it's a far time away. But these brothers are all singing musicians who love the Lord and are going to come to have a good time. And we want to be a blessing. We also have praise and worship by my bro, Pastor Kenny Flight. And my big brother is coming all the way from D.C., Lawrence L.B. Brown is our special guest artist. This brother is a special talent in the kingdom of God. Him and his background singers are coming. We're going to have live music. We're going to have a good time. So y'all make sure y'all join us. Pastor Harrison Johnson, Rodell Hall, Darnell Ely, yours truly, Pastor Ernie McNair, and Pastor Andre Nance. We're going to be in the building giving God some praise. I think that's it. All right. Now it's time, y'all. We ain't too far over our 10-minute mark, but we're going to have to look and see some of them announcements. We had to move because I don't want to miss no time with this brother tonight. Again, he is the director of policy. I think he going to correct me, but he's the director of policy. He do so many things, but this awesome organization, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, which is a think tank here in Baltimore that is far expanded beyond a think tank because they have their hands to the plow in so many different places, making sure that it's equitable for Black people, whether it's in the spaces where policy are being made by legislators or whether it's in the hood, making sure that what they elect to do gets to the community. We are talking tonight to the one and the only, my friend and my brother, Mr. Dayvon Love. Dayvon, thank you for being with us, man.
Hey, man, it's always good to be with you, bro.
Man, listen, so we know why we're here, man. We have seen what I would consider sweeping change come. And I asked you even before we got on the air, were you surprised by any of the races? But, man, we are going to talk one by one because the one thing I don't want people to misunderstand is that the fact that we have so many things that have been promised through consent decrees, policy changes, and how a changing of the guard could impact that. Now, we do know that we still have a general election to come up, but this primary sent a major statement in many of the races where there were upsets. But I want to start off tonight. What was your overall take on what happened last week? What do you feel like the messaging that voters sent to the electorate and to the politics, just to the politicians and those who have traditionally run for office?
Yeah. So what I would say, one of the major issues that really dominates the headlines is around public safety, violence and all that. And part of the challenge is that the conversations that I had, particularly in the news media, really limits the conversation around public safety in such a way that it's often understood as at odds with some of the work around criminal justice reform. And I think a part of what we saw in this election was a level of dissatisfaction with what I think some people perceive to be the failure of criminal justice reform on the issue of public safety, right? That I think and again, I think people frame it as one or the other. And in framing it one or the other, I think what the results demonstrate is that folks are choosing a path to deal with public safety in a way that in some ways harkens back to the way that it was responded to, in a previous era. When we talk about the focus on incarceration and sentence enhancements as an approach to public safety. And one of the things I have to say is that,
hold on, let me jump in real quick. So you said that we're headed back to that?
That I think a lot of the public discourse is taking us back to that. Right. And I think the elections, are demonstrative of that reality. And I think there's a desire, I think, folks to recognize the harm that was done in that previous era. But what has not been done effectively is a space where people understand how both things happen simultaneously, right? How you can have and recognize criminal justice reform, the importance of it, but also how that helps to address the issue of public safety. And I have to put a lion's share of blame really on many of the champions of progressive policy change that have not done a great job of providing a more concrete strategy around dealing with issues of public safety. One of the reasons why, for instance, as you know, I've been such a big supporter of the We Are Us movement, for example, it's because that's a concrete intervention into the issue of community violence. I don't think that the progressive movement has done a good enough job of lifting up efforts like that as their alternative. And in the absence of an alternative, the grandmothers in the community are going to be like, look, I'm going to go with the people that's going to be able to promise me something in terms of safety, as opposed to what I think a lot of times progressives do, which is focus on like the root cause argument, focus on we got to deal with poverty. And those are things that we got to deal with. But so we have to also.
Let me ask you this, Dayvon. Has there been is there anything tangible that you can pull out? And you're a fabric and staple in the movement like I am. But when we start talking about that focus on root causes, what would you say as somebody who's so close to the work has been, as you say, with that progressive mind? What have been is there any staples, any institutions been built, any policy been established? Because I have a hard time, even with that thought process and that being a conversation, finding a place where the meat and potatoes is hit the plate.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, again, that's why like zeroing in on like the work of the We Are Us movement and some of the other, more grassroots attempts at dealing with violence in our community, what I find is that even though there's a mainstreaming of criminal justice reform, what hasn't happened is those who can deliver on the issue of violence that are not law enforcement don't get lifted up, except for those that are in like the public health establishment. You know what I'm saying? Like I think Safe Streets has been absorbed into that, right? And a lot of it, like the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health centric approach, like those are the things that get lifted up. But when it comes to, like neighborhood level interventions into address, because I think that's the only way we're going to really deal with it, right? We're only going to deal with it if they're like ground level interventions that get support, that get lifted up. And so I think without that, the policies that I agree with, like the mandatory minimum sentence enhancements actually don't address violence. Like they actually don't solve the problem. But in the absence of a clear alternative that's articulated and put in the presence of the news media, the average listener is like, oh, well, I'm going to just go with the person who's going to guarantee me public safety and go away from the strategy that seems to have been mainstream. Like I think that, and I'll add this too, and I want to get to this too as well as we talk about some of the specific elections. There is not a precise description of the mechanics as to how law enforcement does its job around public safety. You know what I'm saying? Like I think what people think
it's only built around enforcement. It's not built around actual public safety. I get exactly what you're saying.
Right. And in terms of like there are times where when you listen to law advocates of increasing law enforcement's presence to deal with public safety, what happens is that you'll hear them say, oh, such and such person has been in and out of prison all these different times. And so that's why we need sentence enhancements. We need longer sentences. And what I've had to explain both to legislators and to people who are supporters of that approach is to say, if a person is in and out of prison, they keep going in and out, they're repeat violent offenders, that is actually a demonstration of the impotence of law enforcement, not of the sentences. Because if a person commits first-degree murder, first-degree assault, The sentences in the code already are long enough that you should be able to get them on that. The problem is that law enforcement is incompetent at getting what is needed, and the lack of trust in the community. They can't get anybody that wants to take a stand. And they've been incompetent in terms of being able to deliver the evidence that a prosecutor would need.
Building a case.
To be able to put them away. And so instead of dealing with that, because I think people don't want to go this deep when it comes to actually looking at how law enforcement does their work, it's easier to blame it on a prosecutor. It's easy to blame it on politicians, as opposed to really looking at the extent to which law enforcement has been allowed to be so incompetent and so disconnected from the community, you know what I mean, that instead of actually demanding that they be better, that it's, let's increase these sentences. So that's a part of what I mean, like really getting into the weeds of like, here is why this stuff isn't working. It isn't that nobody wants to lock up the people doing violence. It's that the folks who are responsible for delivering the information to do it are bad at their job.
So what's keeping our politicians who've been unapologetic at taking an approach, especially specifically Democrats in Baltimore, who have been unapologetic at taking an approach to present themselves as advocates, from having those conversations?
So I would say a couple of things. One, I think it was a strategic miscue, right? I think that. And so we can get right to one key example. If you look at the state's attorney's race in Baltimore City, right? I think a strategic misstep is again teasing out the way in which law enforcement and its inability to do its job impacts the ability to address those, who are engaged in violence in our community. But I also think it's also a problem of the larger. Well, here's the other thing too. And this is going to be like, this sounds real crass, but I just think it's true. Outside of the prosecutor's office, you think about like other politicians, most folks just don't pay attention enough to how this really works, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no incentive for them really to really get into the weeds. So when people hear like, yeah, we need to enhance sentences, we need police to start just locking people up, people aren't thinking about like, people aren't doing enough of their own deep dive into what's happening to challenge the prevailing narrative. Because I think right now the prevailing narrative is people don't want to send criminals to jail. Like I think that's the prevailing narrative.
So what actionable response should we hear from people who, because I just think of what some of the redress was when the mayor said that he had a 5-year plan to public safety, which implied that we had about another 1,500 murders that we had to suffer through before we would get to anything that resembled change, which was in direct contrast to what he ran on. What actionable items bring that conversation to the balance that's necessary for people to not have to abandon approach of root causes for one that is specifically rooted in more enforcement?
So here's what I would say is that when we talk about the police department, it's hard to overstate the level of corruption that exists within the police department that even under a consent decree still persists. And unfortunately, many of the people who are bad, and I'm sure you know some of the people that I'm thinking of, who from the inside have talked about the level of corruption at the leadership level, like both in terms of commissioner, but below, like in terms of the immediate staff and leadership below the commissioner. And when you think about the level of corruption that exists that persists within the police department, it creates an environment where there's no incentive, there's no pressure for folks to really deliver on their job. So an immediate actionable item is for there to be oversight of law enforcement to put pressure on them to both change their relationship to the community and to discipline police officers who either aren't effective at doing their job or refuse to do it, right? And I just think the police department, even though publicly people are more willing to have rhetoric about police reform, in terms of like the actual politics to actually challenge them, that's something that has not happened to the extent that it needs to.
You're on Live with the Chop Shop. We come to you every Thursday at 6 p.m. We talking to my man, Dayvon Love. We are talking post-election. And that's a perfect segue because I want to begin to shift the conversation. We got some things that are impacted by this election, such as the consent decree and some of the other things that are already in place. And, if anybody can help us to understand how this impacts those processes moving forward, it's definitely Dayvon. But Dayvon, I want to kind of get to the races. And I want to start right at the top of the list with the governor's race. We knew that we were going to get a new governor. Did the Democratic primary surprise you at all that Westmore prevailed as the winner?
Not at all. I think one of the things I think it's important to know about the Maryland Democratic Party, which has a 2-to-1 advantage over Republicans that are registered in the state, that I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if it's not already majority Black and brown, it's very close. And so the fact that you had Westmore and Tom Perez, a Black man, Latino person as the front runners, I think demonstrate just the demographics of the state of Maryland going in that direction. And the past 3 Democratic nominees for governor have been Black. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's a nod to the fact that the party knows that Black people are a part of the rank and file in a way that they have to be responsive to, which is at odds with what I think the top of the Democratic Party leadership is interested in. There's still vestiges of the Democratic Party that want many of the white corporate elements of the party to maintain power, right? And therefore, and I would argue that helps us to understand why the past couple of nominees have not won, right, their races. And so I think that the challenge that is before Westmore is whether or not him as a nominee and whether the party will invest in what it needs to do to really turn out Black people. And in order to do that, they're going to need to speak directly to the issues that Black people have that I think traditionally the party has only paid lip service to, right? So I think Westmore, that's the challenge before him, is really speaking to the rank and file in the way the Democratic Party statewide has not been interested in doing.
I listen to one particular radio station that has a tendency, once you get out of the morning show, to cater to people who are on the more conservative side. And there was a big shock that Dan Cox beat out Kelly Schultz. Was that something that was shocking to you?
I must say, I was actually fairly surprised. I actually think that's probably the most significant development statewide. I actually think that's the most significant development statewide is Dan Cox winning the Republican nomination for a few reasons. One, I think, people often characterize the state of Maryland as, a blue state. And even with Hogan as a governor for 2 terms, Hogan is like Republican light.
Yeah, Reagan is Republican.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to have Dan Cox as the nominee, as far right as he is, I think really dispels this notion of, Maryland being this progressive blue state. And furthermore, I think it poses an interesting challenge that Maryland has not had to confront electorally in its modern history. And that is that because Maryland in presidential cycles is like 800,000 plus Democrats in terms of statewide Democratic races.
So it's always going to be the Democrat win this.
You know what I mean? Right, on the presidential cycle. So for this is one of those moments where some people, I think, will sleep on Dan Cox. And I think that would be an unwise thing because I think that Dan Cox, as a right-wing candidate, out of the Republican Party, who we were surprised that he would be able to get what he got, he may awaken a base electorally in Maryland that has not had a reason to vote. We don't know what that base, the potential for that base is. Like, we have no idea because we've not had a candidate of this ilk. Right.
I've had that conversation because there's some people, first of all, at the state level, we've been proving that a Democratic nominee is not guaranteed anything. And this candidate is so far from who Larry Hogan is that I see it the same way that you see it. I think that it would be a big mistake because we've seen, not just in previous elections, but we've seen in other ways it's been expressed that a base for that exists. A base for when Donald Trump called Baltimore City a rat infested, blah, blah, blah. a lot of his supporters right here in the state mobilized to go out to demonstrate by having themselves recorded, cleaning and doing it. They were people that supported that voice. And we know that the Republican Party has a movement pushing towards 2024. You said it. He's not to be slept on. What do you think his real chances are of winning the governorship?
I think it's a possibility. I mean, he's certainly an underdog, I think reasonably so, but I think it's certainly possible. I think they're, similar to what happened in 2016 with Donald Trump. There are a lot of, I imagine, conservative Democrats that'll tell me and you that they're going to vote for Wes Moore, but when they go into the booth, they're going to think about it.
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the things that you see, because we're talking about having Wes Moore, who will pretty much rubber stamp a lot of things that comes out of General Assembly because it's so Democratic based. Will people who have more conservative views, even if they're not Republicans, right? And I tell people all the time, I'm a registered independent, right? But I have a lot of conservative views, and I do all the advocacy in the world, but I have a lot of views that just don't align with hard left liberalism, socialism, and because that's what did it for Trump. And people don't realize it was a lot of people that voted around his position on abortion, his position on same-sex marriage, and all of that sort of thing. What should Roe v. Wade being overturned say to us about a candidate like Dan Cox here in Maryland? I should have sent you that question before.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good question. And I would say a couple of things. One is that I don't think that we know Wes Moore's politics, really. I don't think we actually know because he doesn't have a track record in the policy arena on these issues in a meaningful way. And that was one, and I know Wes, he's someone I know. I've known him for a while. I think he's a good person. And, this is one of my criticisms of him is that we actually don't know. We don't have a record of what his policies are. And so we don't know whether he's going to be progressive, left, moderate. Like, we actually don't know. And I'm actually very curious to see how he will run in the general, right? Whether he will run towards the middle or whether he'll run more as a progressive. Both, I think those choices, there are pros and cons to whichever approach in the general.
If you were the person that was in charge of his campaign, and with this candidate that he's going to be running against, and where things seem to be trending around Baltimore issues, or not Baltimore, but statewide issues, what would be your advice to him? Would your advice be to him to run hard left, or would it be to run kind of more moderate down the middle?
Look, my advice would be, but this is because it's me, run hard left and go get Black people and brown people. Focus on getting Black and brown people. Focus on, in addition to public safety, focus on, dealing with a lot of the systemic issues. Focus on, building Black collective wealth. Focus on addressing the criminal justice. Like, go deep and build that base. Now, there are going to be elements of the Democratic Party who don't want that. You know what I'm saying? And so, if I had to guess what he'll do, I'm guessing he'll probably go towards the middle. I think that's what his advisors will tell him to do. But I would be like, no, let's go get our people. Right.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because the other big race, and the one that was most significant to Baltimore, was the state's attorney's race. And it seemed like it was a fight between Theroux and Marilyn Mosby, who represents those two polar opposite approaches to running the state's attorney's office. And the person that ran in the middle seemed to be the one that prevailed. Is that saying anything to us about where Democratic politics are trending?
Yeah, I think that the way that Marilyn Mosby was covered in the media, and I think just some of the general approach in terms of how all the campaigns went, focused a lot on her as a personality, right? And I think that did a disservice to really having a conversation about the issues at hand. Because I just think what happened was that Marilyn Mosby just became radioactive as a personality. Like I don't really think that there was real conversations around policy, and particularly around her policies and the connection between that and public safety, right? And I think with Ivan Bates, who will likely become the next state's attorney, I believe that in some ways his mandate is against some of the more progressive policies that Maryland, as a person who's in Annapolis, who does policy advocacy, like I'm down there when she's supporting the kinds of policies that, in terms of challenging the criminal justice system, addressing mass incarceration and tough on crime stuff. And so I do think that, so I think Bates has a mandate that goes in the opposite direction of those policies. But this goes back to what I was saying earlier. I don't think the issue is people's affinity to the policies. I think if you ask somebody in a vacuum, do you support not criminalizing low-level behaviors just in a vacuum? Most people would say, of course. I think it's because of the context we're in now, where people don't feel like there is an approach to dealing with public safety that is working. That then if you ask people, those questions in that context, people are like, whatever it takes to get people off the street. You know what I'm saying? And so that requires a level of detailed conversation about how these policies actually do help public safety that just wasn't being had. Like that conversation wasn't being had. And I think I would give a majority of the blame. I think the campaign has to take some responsibility for that. But I think the majority of the blame is the news media, because every time you heard about Marilyn Mosby, it wasn't about her policies. It's about her personality.
And I'm gonna tell you, I actually thought making her a martyr would give her a third term. That's what I thought, because I thought people would rally around what appeared to be petty issues that they were taking with her in the media, and that it might actually help her campaign. Let me ask you this, because this is really the race where there's a lot to unpack. How much do you think the fact that in their own way, Marilyn Mosby and Thuroo Vignarajah could be equated with some level of integrity issues? I don't want to call it outright corruption, because there are things that are alleged. Neither one has been convicted of anything. But the idea of integrity issues, how much of that do you think either hurt them or helped Ivan Bates?
I think it helped them tremendously. I think it helped them tremendously. One of my biggest frustrations generally with the political conversations in the mainstream is that it's so focused on personality, right? So we don't actually get to the policies and what people are saying they will do. So for instance, and I plan on, again, people familiar with my work, I plan on having a meet with Mr. Bates and trying to see like what his stated policy agenda will be. And I look forward to doing that. I watched him during one of the election night coverage. I watched him say like, yeah, we got to send a message that if you get caught with a gun, you're going to jail. Right. And to me, when I hear that, what I wonder is that a statement of policy? Because if that's a statement of policy, I have concerns, right? Because just because a person has a gun, you're going to throw them under the jail. Like, that's not going to stop violence. Now, if what he's saying is we want to hold people who are shooting people more accountable, and he has a plan for that, well, then that I'd be willing to listen to and hear.
So you and I have, because what I try to do is I try not to make the discourse comparable to what happens when Marvin and Dayvon talk. It's the basic, at core basic voter who decided that they were going to go and cast their ballot for Ivan Bates, who is seeing 300 plus murders a year, and who have seen everybody from the governor to really local government who has not been accountable to it, kind of shift the blame to the idea that it's repeat. Because for me, even the Democratic base didn't help Marilyn Mosby when you start seeing the mayor and other people come out saying these terms, repeat violent offenders. That kind of shifts the blame if the narrative has been cast that these repeat offenders are because of the state's attorney's office, right? Mm-hmm. So without saying it, y'all didn't help sis. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Y'all didn't help her. And then not standing with her in certain places where the establishment was coming after her. Not to say you agree with her policy-wise, because there's some places where I had disagreements policy-wise, but you wasn't coming at my sister. You know what I'm saying? When it come down to just that element of it, I'm going to be a black man first, and I'm going to stand with sis and make sure that that queen is protected. Do you feel as though when we look at it from that perspective, right, did her own base kind of turn against her?
Yeah, I would say that the level of the conversation around violence and the extent to which violence is a major concern, I think people are afraid. I think rightly so, there's legitimacy to that. And I think people want to see immediate change. And, you know, people, a rational thought could be, she had 8 years. Things haven't been much different. I want something different, right? That's a rational belief. I mean, again, if you look at like the election of Donald Trump in 2016, a big part of what got him through was people were sick of the political establishment. So anybody that was just against what was happening was someone who was likely to vote. And so and then not to compare Mr. Bates to Trump, but to say that people who,
I get it,
but people who are like, what's happening now sucks, and we just want something different. That's a rational belief, and I think that helped Ivan Bates.
You on Live with the Chop Shop. We come to you every Thursday at 6 p.m. We're talking to a good friend of this show and some in the national media as well, Mr. Dayvon Love of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We're talking post-election. Right now, we're in a conversation about the state's attorney's race specifically, which was the race to me that had the greatest implications here in Baltimore. But there was an attorney general's race that happened at the state level. How much does that impact and inform what happens in the state's attorney's office moving forward?
So the race really between Anthony Brown and Katie O'Malley. I mean, to me, what was the biggest thing at stake was the O'Malley machine. And even though both of them, you know,
I never thought she had a shot. I know
yes.
Anthony Brown, and statewide, this brother is beloved in some of the larger counties. PG and Montgomery County alone, this brother, and Katie O'Malley hasn't helped herself locally.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there was moments where I was worried.
Wow.
You know, I was worried because Maryland, you know, this will be the first cycle. If Anthony Brown and Westmore win, it will be the first time a black person was elected statewide. Now, I'm not including Boyd Rutherford and Michael Steele because they were lieutenant governor. So I'm saying, so both of them would be the first black people elected statewide in Maryland's history. You know what I mean? And so I was concerned, you know. But I think the most important thing about that race is the O'Malley political machine. And I think, and again, it goes back to what I was saying before about, I think people think too much about individual people as opposed to the machines that back them. And I wrote a piece and I got some critical feedback, you know, where folks felt like, even though I say in the piece that, you know, a spouse shouldn't necessarily be held accountable for the actions of their spouse, but I kind of went ahead and did that. And the folks who I felt most understood the piece, the point is that she's still benefiting from utilizing the political machine that's based off of Martin O'Malley, what he built, right? She hadn't disavowed it. She hasn't distinguished herself in terms of the policies that machine was key in engineering. And so for me, it was just very important for that political machine not to gain any ground.
I think that was a mistake for her if that's what she was counting on, because your lieutenant governor couldn't beat Larry Hogan the first time. The candidate that came out of the party couldn't beat him the second time. The O'Malley machine to me is nothing here at the state level after the 2 terms that Martin O'Malley had, and we haven't seen it translate into anything on a national level. But we do know that he still has some of his surrogate children in City Hall. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. And had she won, that would have been a resurgence of that machine.
Okay. So that's what you mean, a resurgence, because I don't think that's the vehicle to get you there to win it on a statewide level. And there was another race, the Central Committee. There were some delegate races and things of that nature, but the Central Committee has some interesting pieces to it. And I want you to kind of open that up before we go back to talking a little bit more about the state's attorneys, because I want to talk impact and what we should look to see out of the next state's attorney and the next governor. But talk to us about that Central Committee race.
Yeah, so State Central Committee is really a very low-level party position, right? It's a position within the Democratic Party. It's supposed to be the grassroots base of the Democratic Party. And its most important responsibility is really just when a person who's a delegate or senator resigns or is removed from office, they select the person that serves out the rest of the term. And often people who apply to run for State Central Committee have political aspirations of their own and are trying to get votes so that if someone steps down, sometimes it's coordinated. Sometimes a person knows that a person's not going to do their whole term. And so there's stuff done behind the scenes, the State Central Committee to put people, right? So that's the importance of the State Central Committee. And the 41st District's State Central Committee race, I think, was of particular importance because Senator Carter, who had talked to me about a year and a half ago about running for State Central Committee, really because she wanted more people who were partial to her perspective to be on it. And we noticed, though, after the filing deadline, that there were a slew of Orthodox Jewish folks who had applied to be, who ran for State Central Committee. And then it came to our attention that Councilman Yitzi Scheifler was going to put together a slate, an all-white slate from his community for State Central Committee. So in response, Senator Carter reached out to folks who had applied to try to pull together a slate that was more diverse and represented the district. District that's 63% Black, right? And so apart from me, we understood Yitzi's slate and himself running for State Central Committee really as an attack on the politics of Senator Carter. Senator Carter is the most progressive legislator of the Maryland State Senate. And many of the major efforts that LBS has participated in legislatively, Senator Carter was crucial in those efforts. Yitzi is a conservative Democrat, and that's being generous, right?
That's very generous.
Three of the precincts that voted for Trump in 2016, 3 of the 8 of those precincts are in his district. So it gives you a sense of the level of conservatism, right, that exists in that district. And when I've heard him on BAL radio, for instance, the more conservative leaning radio station, I've heard him be critical of Senator Carter's policies. So I understood it, in addition to the fact that it's just very off-putting to have an all-white slate run for a State Central Committee. I mean, you couldn't find any Black people, right, any other folks to be on his slate. So for me, it was kind of jarring to see that and experience that. And so the other thing with that particular race, in addition to the politics of it, it's just thinking about the future of the 41st District, right? Because when we look electorally, and when you look at the numbers, it's a district with a Black senator, 1 Black delegate, and 2 Jewish delegates, right? And one of the things that the numbers dictate is that Black people vote for non-Black people in ways that other folks aren't voting for us. And that's one of those things that's a touchy thing to say, right? Just given the politics of that, Black-Jewish relationships and like the, tendency to use blanket, tags of anti-Semitism and all that. But just when you look at the numbers, right, that it's clear. And then when you look at the State Central Committee race, and the outcome of that race was that 4 of Senator Carter's folks who ran on her slate won, and 3 of Yitzi's slate, and then a person who was unaffiliated won, who was a Black man, including myself on Senator Carter's slate. And so, but when you look at some of the results, it's just one of those things that I think we have to start asking a question about, like Black electoral power in context where our vote is not being reciprocated, right?
How much of the lack of Black vote, because I don't want to overlook that, how much of the lack of Black vote, the fact that we still have issues without people getting to the polls, is a part of that?
I think that's absolutely a part of that. And I think, unfortunately, the history of Black elected officials in this city and around the country in terms of them delivering for the community is not a good one, right? Of course, there are notable exceptions. And so I think it creates a dynamic where people are discouraged from going to the polls because of the lack of quality that generally Black elected officials have delivered. So one of the things that for LBS that's really important is something that we're going to actually spend more time in the coming years, is really developing a political machine that can help people understand and engage in politics, not from just the perspective of a consumer, because I think that's what Black people get relegated to, is politics as a consumer. So go vote as a consumer, as opposed to let's build a machine, set an agenda, and then people have the experience of being able to get things done as a result of using their electoral power in that way. And that's something that it's a long-term solution. It's something that's hard for people in the moment to grasp onto. But I think the only way things will change when it comes to Black participation is for people, because white folks got machines. Like, we see individuals, they have machines. They have full-scale operations. They have agendas. They have, they got prioritized bond bills, and capital projects. We need to build machines in order to deliver for our community, as opposed to hoping that charismatic, articulate individual people are going to deliver for our community.
Before we give you 30 seconds to give your final wrap up, I got to make a confession. Bro, I do not and have not specifically endorsed candidates. But if in fact that machine, if I can contribute to helping build that machine, I would sign up tomorrow. And I know so many brothers like myself who have a great sphere of influence in the community that would move differently as it pertains to endorsing a Black political machine that has clear objectives versus our unwillingness to endorse the charismatic candidate. Dayvon, before we go, can you just give us your final thoughts?
I would say really to that last point around these political machines. I think the elections, there was a lot of change. A lot of things. We'll see what the change means for our community, but I think it's really important that the politicians that are going to occupy the offices that they're going to occupy, it's up to us to make them do the things that we need them to do for our community. Like, we have to make them do it. And that's one of the things I often tell people is, it's one thing to ask someone to do something for you. It's another thing to say, look, this is what I want you to do. And if you don't do it, there's going to be political consequences. And so I hope that's the mind frame that people walk away from this conversation.
Well, that's another thing that I've done. I had the pleasure to do a lot of independently, but if it became a movement, I would sign up for that too. So remember my name, Dayvon Love, man. Thank you for stopping through, man. You have been on so many major national platforms, and you never tell your brother no when I reach out to you as long as time permits, man. We love and appreciate you here at the Chop Shop. And we're going to get you back in, man, because there's still much more of this conversation that I would like to have. And, man, you are just the guy to talk to. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
I appreciate that, bro.
All right, man. Listen, we got coming with us next week another person who's going to help us to understand how some of the things, because, listen, we've been sitting in our tent doors waiting to see the impact of some of the policy items and how they will surrounding policing and the consent decree. Well, we got the brother here who's going to talk about how this new regime can and might impact a lot of that policy. We talking about the one and only, my big brother himself, Mr. Ray Kelly. I was with him today. He's excited to be able to come on. Y'all, we're going to be talking probably through the month. I may reach out to Senator Carter and a few other people to have conversations. I'm going to give my sister, who I love, Sheila Dixon, a call and get these folks to come on here, because we've got to understand how this election and what appears to be sweeping change, whether it's the people we voted for or the ones that we didn't, there's going to be new people in the seats that matter most to the things that we've been trying to achieve maybe over the course of the last, what's this? This is 2022, 7 to 8 years since 2015. It's going to be impacted, and Ray is going to be here to help us understand what that impact looks like. So make sure you tune in next week. As always, I got to thank my right hand and my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts, who was always on the ones and twos making the magic happen. Shaka, thank you for riding out with us again, bro. There's no Chop Shop without Shaka Pitts, y'all. This is our podcast. He is not my engineer. He is 50% of this show, man. And I love you and I appreciate you and thank you for all that you contribute. Y'all, listen, I got to make one more big bursting gratitude, y'all. I looked and some memories were coming up on the timeline of shows, y'all. We are almost 2.5 years into being the Chop Shop. I didn't know if this was just going to be a pandemic thing, and if it passed with the pandemic, we were going to let it go. But you continue to show up, you continue to show out. So I want to thank every person that's here that is a part of our viewing and listening audience. I saw my big bro, Coy Bonds. Man, listen, you're going to have to bring the kingdom perspective to this electoral conversation. And I'm going to call you when I get off the air tonight so we can look at some dates so we can bring that kingdom perspective, because work like We Are Us and some of the other things that faith leaders are doing is going to be impacted by this proposed changing of the guard. So, Corey, if you're still on here and you listening to me, bro, well, I'm going to be hitting you up because we're going to need to definitely have that conversation of how that impacts moving forward. If you listen and you like the content tonight, send a donation to $thechopshopbmore. That's $thechopshopbmore to our Cash App. Everything that's donated goes back into the channel. Again, that's $thechopshopbmore. I always say, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it, would it make a sound? Of course it was. It was just nobody there to hear it. You guys show up for us. You show out for us. You get in the comments and you continue to show us love.
Come to the show.
That's the only reason that we're still here. Thank you so much for continuing to support the Chop Shop. Remember what I always say. Trust God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Love where you are. I love Baltimore. I serve Baltimore. Baltimore has been instrumental in giving me a second chance, and the people have received me and my change. So I want to give right back and produce change. And always remember, above and beyond anything else, that we can be more. Thank you for being with us tonight.
I can be more. There's nothing that I can't achieve if I just believe. You can be more. You can make every dream a reality. We can be more. Be more, be more.
Yeah.
I can be more.
I wake up every day and try to be more. I pray I be more. It's easy to achieve anything you believe. Like hold your head high. Girl, you got a reason to breathe. I see a rare mind. Boy, you got a reason to dream. Let's take flight. Give the children a reason to see redemption. We grow up in the jacks where it's evil and wicked. Where the people with success don't want to send you a visit. But we still finna make this life worth living. Now throw your hands to the sky if you feel it. Hey, throw your hands to the sky if you the realest. You got a vision. Let's put them pistols away and make sure the OGs keep the community safe. In the world where the ladies crying, the babies dying,